Welcome back to the latest edition of Until Saturday. It's the first episode where I'm sitting crisscross applesauce on a bed in California, but we're going to make it work. The second we decided to do this podcast, a person with a weed whacker showed up at the rental house that I'm at, and it is loud. So this is the quietest room that we can find. If you can see, we have TJ Maxx artwork behind me if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. And I'm joined today by Dave Ubben to talk about lessons that we've learned. And I think one lesson that I should have learned is maybe don't sign up for podcasts while you're on vacation and you don't know what situation you're in. Dave, good to have you here. Sorry about the way this all looks. We're going to make it happen. I'm excited for the show. I think there's a lot to learn from last year.
So you're not on a boat right now? I assumed that you were. It looked like you're sitting on, I don't know, the bow, the stern. I'm not a nautical guy.
It's like the Forgetting Sarah Marshall when he kept changing the background. I'm on a boat.
Oh, yeah. We gotta have you podcast as a kitten one time, Ari.
Yeah, iron your shirts, even your t-shirt. Before we get into it, though, Dave, I always got to do my spiel, and that spiel is, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, whatever. Please leave a 5-star review, and if you want to watch me in a weird, inconvenient sitting situation, sitting on a mattress that wants to be memory foam but has lost its memory, go to the YouTube channel, and the link can be found in the show's description here. Again, what we're going to be talking about today is lessons that we learned from 2022 that can be carried over into 2023. We both submitted a few of our own, and we had very little overlap, which means that there was a lot to learn from last year, and I'm excited to get into it. So, Dave, why don't you do the honors here and give us your first lesson from last year that we need to remember and learn from heading into this season?
Well, Ari, I'm glad you're sitting down because we need to have a tough conversation. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the 3 words that trigger you more than any on planet Earth.
Well, you're already wrong.
But Ari,
let me try to guess Can I guess it? Can I guess? Are you going to say
no,
that you don't have
guessing.
to?
No guessing.
Okay, just please.
Is it possible?
I'm shutting the podcast off if you say what I think you're going to say.
Is it possible that maybe total talent might not be, might not limit teams as much as you might think they do in the portal era and in the playoff era, and that there are ways around cheating your total talent level and doing more than maybe had previously been possible?
I buy that. I mean, TCU did it, so you can't act.
This is a TCU argument. They did something that I think we both. I don't know that I think you would have said it was impossible this time last year. Not them specifically, but just them. TCU as a concept, a team ranked 32nd in total talent composite, getting the national championship.
Yeah,
I would have said you would have needed all of the breaks that TCU got. The Big 12 was down a little bit last year. TCU won a bunch of dramatic games. Then they get into the playoff, despite losing in the Big 12 championship, which is kind of amazing on its own. And then Michigan, just a parade of errors to help them win that game, and they get to the national championship, where stars certainly did matter. I think that was a very obvious takeaway from that game. But I think it made me reassess in the portal era that you could have a new coach taking over a 5-7 team, coming in, adding a couple guys. Johnny Hodges was a big pickup for them, having a couple guys come out of nowhere. But they did have a lot of NFL talent on that team. Max Duggan, Quentin Johnson. I think Kendra Miller, will have a nice little future there as well. We'll see. But I think TCU last year stretched the limit of what might be possible if you are not in that blue chip ratio.
Okay, I'm going to try really hard to be like, yeah, dude, you're right. And you are. There's no question that they were able to use the portal. I think they had like 3 or 4 scholarship defensive linemen heading into the spring before last year. And then they got 4 or 5 guys to, they brought in important pieces through the portal that turned out to be important enough to help them win games at a unprecedented level for a program that is at that talent level. They made it to the national championship game, and they did everything that you said that they just did. So for me, it would be disingenuous to sit here right now and act like a team that isn't as talented on paper can play for a national championship because it just happened. That said, how much of that is portal and how much of that was just incredible circumstances and a job well done by a coach at TCU while also having the most advantageous possible path to the national championship game a team could ever have. Like, I think that like last year, when push came to shove and they finally played a team in a Stars Matter game, they weren't even competitive, and they lost their conference championship game and they beat Michigan, a team that isn't in that pantheon of stars, the wealth of stars that you would find at a Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State. It all perfectly lined up to give us a result that we have not seen before. So I don't know how much of it is portal neutralized everything or how much of it was perfect storm of circumstance that allowed them to have a Cinderella run. Maybe it's a little bit of a combination of both.
Yeah, I think it is.
I don't think I look at TCU from last year and change my mind on who I think can win a national championship. But if the lesson here is if you're a good team that is well coached by a guy like Sonny Dykes and you get through your conference, which is kind of down last year with Oklahoma not being who it is, you don't even win your own conference. You lose in the conference championship game, and then you don't play a monster in the first round of the semifinal and then make it to the championship game. Then it was just an incredible run of circumstance for them as much as it was an incredible run of playing well. And I don't want to diminish what TCU did because it was certainly unbelievable, but they don't change my mind in terms of like what it takes to win a national championship. They weren't even close to winning it. They were on a field because of the circumstances that led them there, not because, they were some sort of, exception to the rule that talent matters. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if that's
I think TCU they're a complicated conversation because they got further than we ever could have expected. And then they got humbled in a more dramatic way. I mean, Ari, even you had to be like 58 points, guys. My gosh. That's a lot of points to lose by.
I thought the spread was the easiest spread of the year.
Yeah, that's fair, but the spread was only like 12 or 13, wasn't it?
17, wasn't it?
I don't know.
It might have moved
by game time. I think that TCU has opened up a world of possibility that you have to entertain the possibility, which you didn't before. Let me read to you the list of teams that are receiving votes in this year's preseason poll. Texas Tech, South Carolina, UCLA, UTSA, Arkansas, Boise State, Pitt, Kentucky, Louisville, Troy, KU. No, that's incorrect, actually. They voted wrong. But Auburn, Minnesota, Toledo, Duke, Mississippi State, Florida, Illinois, Baylor, Coastal, South Alabama, NC State, James Madison, Liberty. Like, imagine one of those teams playing for a national title in January. It's hard to think about that and say, oh, I could see that now. But, like, you have to sort of entertain, well, I guess it's theoretically possible. We literally just saw it.
I don't know if you read Bruce's story about Michigan.
I did.
I think last year I was the lead of the story. Basically,
how'd that make you feel, Ari?
He called me and made sure that I was okay with it first. He's a classy guy. Nothing offensive. It's my actual stance. So, Michigan is the type of team that gets me scratching my head. And I think this is a good segue into my number one. And we have one similar point, and I'll get to that when we get to it. But my number one is Michigan isn't a fluke and deserves to be taken seriously. You might have been able to think like, hey, that one year they finally got over the hump on Ohio State, beat them on their home floor. Ohio State was soft that year. They got their year. But, Michigan isn't a fluke. And the reason why I bring this up right now to put a, bow on yours is Michigan is the perfect type of team that would be the ideal exception to that rule. Not any of the teams that you just read off in the top 25 receiving votes section. It's a team that's actually really, really talented because they developed well, could have more than 10 draft picks this year, and are playing in a sport that doesn't have a bona fide program that is proven to be exceptional already. All of the big-time programs that they're going to have to beat to win a national championship this year, Alabama in their quarterback situation, Georgia in their quarterback situation, and Ohio State in their quarterback situation, there's no complete super team right now as we know it. Now, by the end of the year, I'm sure one of those three teams is going to turn out to be a monster because that's the way talent works. But there is a window or a sliver of opportunity from coming into the season from that standpoint, where a team like Michigan, who has a ton of draft picks on it, is older, is experienced, and is the best iteration of a team that's been to the playoff 2 years in a row now, could win a national championship because their talent matched up with a season where the big dogs are kind of limping coming into the year, is that opportunity. So I think Michigan isn't a fluke. That's my number one, but I also think like Michigan would be a huge exception to the talent rule, but also they're probably way more equipped to do it than, say, TCU was last year or any of the 20 teams you just named off as receiving votes. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely true. I don't remember a time that one team has changed the circumstances and the perception of a coach so quickly in 2 games. I mean, I think the what Michigan has done to Ryan Day's I'm not going to say legacy, but perception and circumstance at Ohio State. I don't remember another team doing that, in which you have a guy who is sort of accepted as like, this is the next guy. And then in 2 years, I don't know that we could say he's necessarily on the hot seat, but like, don't lose to Michigan again, and especially don't get beat up in the trenches by Michigan again, or else there might be some real conversations being had. Again, we've talked about this before, but you don't want your name associated with John Cooper if you're Ohio State's head coach. That's just the reality of the situation.
Well, think about how much Jim Harbaugh's reputation has changed in those 2 games as well.
Well, but I think Jim Harbaugh is finally doing what everyone. If you told me that what they were doing now was going to happen in year 3 and year 4 when he took that job, I would have said, yeah, probably. We've seen this before.
Yeah.
It's weird that it was not going to happen. It was not going to happen. And Bruce also had a nice story on how they flipped it, but like, and now it's happening. But I think so, like, he's changed it somewhat, but he's sort of doing what almost everyone thought he would do, just a little bit later than he do it. But I mean, that Michigan is, the personification right now of the Stanford intellectual brutality. That's what they are.
Yeah. Well, the thing that is fascinating to me is that Michigan has 2 or 3, I think 4 players on Bruce's freak list that he released on Tuesday, August 15th. And that's obviously a staple of preseason college football coverage. I urge everybody to read at The Athletic. But 4 guys on that list, and none of them are JJ McCarthy or Blake Corum or some of the guys that, are the names that we know from that team. You match that up with the idea that they're playing Penn State on the road and Ohio State at home. They win one of those games or both of those games. They make the college football playoff again. And then you have first-year starter quarterback at one of the other teams. Like, if Michigan was ever going to win a national championship with the stars situated the way that they are, because they're dwarfed in the blue chip ratio. I mean, I think Alabama's blue chip ratio is 90% and Michigan's is like 53%. Like, they're not even close to what you would need to be. So the hope is that these 3-star freaks on this list change the numbers and change the perception of how I view it. So to me, I think these are 2 good number 1 points, because Michigan, to me, might be the team that actually props up your number 1 point. And then my number 1 point, obviously, is to take them seriously. So they're just really good, man. And it just has to be said. So, I'm happy that we're in a position now where we can acknowledge that. And I'm excited to see if they can actually do it, because no team has won a national championship in the playoff era that isn't one of the top 3 teams in the composite ratings. I think Clemson might have done it one year, but that was like the Deshaun Watson year. So anyway, okay. Next point for you, Dave.
I remember the halcyon days of conference realignment when schools would be very sad about, we can't leave our in-state rival behind. We can't do this. They were torn on making these decisions. My take is loyalty is dead. Whatever you think may influence realignment decisions and schools deciding for the future, money is driving all this. Nobody's even trying to convince you of otherwise. Washington leaves Washington State in the dust without a second thought. Oregon leaves Oregon State in the dust without a second thought. USC and UCLA saying peace out to Cal and Stanford. I remember a lot of these moves, in the state of Texas, sorting through There was a lot of hurt feelings, when the Southwest Conference broke up. And then you have the Big 12 when Texas is sort of figuring out what they were going to do. Texas A&M leaves. A lot of stuff, a lot of conflicting, situations. I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, when they still had their leadership intact with their president and AD, they were aligned. They were convinced that they were going to be together wherever they went. Not anymore. That doesn't matter anymore. So I hope that we can do away with the idea that anything except for our school's bottom line is going to influence anybody's decision in any realignment decision moving forward. Because now that obviously we have a bicoastal Big Ten, we're trending toward a bicoastal ACC. Nothing matters except the money. I think there were always other things that maybe people wanted to pretend mattered, but not sure that's happening.
Yeah, and I wish there was something for me to add to that. It's just anybody who's been paying attention for college football and the changes that have, happened in the last month, I think had a front row seat to the point that you're making there. So, I'm with you. It's a shame. The one thing I will miss, and we can debate the expanded playoff and, rule changes and all the stuff that comes and goes with the sport. The one thing that I will unequivocally miss, and I think will make the sport worse, is the lack of geographical tribalism that, used to be such a main cornerstone of fanhood. Like, I do think that, the SEC chance that everybody loves so much, was the South standing up and rooting with the South, and I know that, Southern teams are still going to win championships and, the SEC is still by and large the South, but I just wish it was North versus South versus East versus West. And it's just never going to be that again. And I think that stinks. And it's all because of the point that you made.
I think if you're looking to the future and looking for what realignment might happen in the future, it's because you've had relationships century long, however long you think they've been. They don't matter. Don't think they matter. They don't.
And obviously the money is getting more and more vast, and this is a very important time to, as we veer on towards the super conference thought process, it's kind of like getting on a boat, life raft when it's on a sinking ship. It's like, I love you or I like you. We've had a long history together, but like, it's like eat or be eaten, kill or be killed. And when people see an opportunity to go get their paychecks and preserve their program and their universities, financial windfall, then there's no hard feelings. It's just, all's fair in love and war and conference expansion now. And I think that the result of it is going to be a worse sport, but I don't want to make people cry today. Okay. My number 2 is Brian Kelly is for real at LSU. And I will be the first to admit, when Brian Kelly took the job, I understood completely why he left Notre Dame for that job. He maxed out what Notre Dame could be from a talent perspective. They went to multiple college football playoffs, ended up losing, pretty handily to Alabama. And it's just the writing was on the wall that, with the academic, situation there and the geographical challenges that Notre Dame faces, it was just going to be impossible for him to assemble a roster that was talented enough to win a national championship. And the only thing that he had left to do was to win that. So what does he do? He takes a big raise, gets a God contract. He goes down to Louisiana, a place that I believe has won a national championships with each of its last 3 coaches, Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, and Les Miles. This is a place that does football very well. It's not a coaching thing. It's a place thing. And the reason why is because it is the only gig in town for one of the most densely populated areas for talent in the country. And I was kind of worried, like, hey, is this guy going to fit into Louisiana? This family accent thing that everyone was making fun of, was that like a symptom of not getting how to assimilate to a new culture? And I think that he has proven to be just a damn good football coach. I mean, say what you want about him, but marrying LSU and Brian Kelly kind of seems like a national championship is an inevitability at some point. And you're really high on them coming into this year. But when I saw them beat Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Arkansas in 4 straight wins last year, I know it didn't really finish the way that they wanted it to, with 2 consecutive losses to A&M and Georgia. But, there was a chance there for a while that they could have snuck into the playoff even after losing to Tennessee. So I think that I saw a lot out of him last year that makes me think this isn't going to be a disaster. In fact, I think that a championship at some point in the next 5 years seems like an inevitability. Can you get on board with that?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with you. I think it might happen this year. I don't understand what the issue with the perception of LSU is in 2023, like in the immediate future. The guy walks into the SEC, wins the SEC West in his first year, despite the fact that Bama has a returning Heisman winner, brings back just about everybody. I mean, they didn't lose a ton. Kayshon Boutte had a real up and down last year. They should bring back, obviously Harold Perkins, Jane Daniels, Malik Neighbors. All these guys make a couple nice additions in the portal. And then Bama loses a Heisman winner at quarterback, loses Will Anderson on the short list of most disruptive defenders in the country. And we're supposed to be debating on who's going to win the West? What? I truly am baffled at this offseason conversation that we're debating this. Like, LSU seems clearly the better team to me.
So what is it that baffles you that we don't treat LSU with the respect that a team like Alabama would get?
Both. There's a lot of folks I think the SEC preseason poll had Bama ahead of LSU. And I think it's just I think it's a Saban thing.
So I'm just going to go down. We're going to re-snake because my point 3 or my lesson 3 kind of mirrors this or goes with this. My lesson 3 is Alabama does not have the benefit of the doubt anymore. And I wonder if you'll debate me on this, but last year, if the college football playoff committee wanted to put Alabama into the playoff, they could have done it. Mm-hmm. And maybe if this were 2 years ago and the same circumstances happened, they would have. And they didn't. I think that there is a certain level of, heading into the season, and I think that's been most accentuated by you on this podcast feed of doubting whether or not they're going to be as good as people think they're going to be. And, that was perfect segue to what you just said of maybe this point would have been even more right if they weren't picked to win the West. Maybe that's the benefit of the doubt. But I think with the college football playoff committee and Alabama's run, that there is just an understanding and an assumption that they are so incredibly talented and so incredibly deep that even if they have a disappointing season, that the college football playoff committee wants to bend over backwards to include them in the dance at the Final Four. And I think that last year proved that that's no longer the case, and I don't believe that it ever was. So going into this year, Alabama's going to have to earn every single thing that it gets. And yes, people in the media might have voted for them to win the SEC West, but LSU was sitting right there. And if Alabama is going to be in the playoff this year, they're going to have to go out and earn that shit, wholesale. You know what I mean? And that to me is like the perception around Alabama is certainly, say what you want about that preseason poll of expecting to win the West. People are not looking at Alabama the same way that they did a year or two ago.
I think we're at a point where you're somewhat right, but I think that there's a delineation of people that are paying attention and people that are not. I think there's a lot of people that maybe they don't pay attention to college football, year round. And they say, well, I think Alabama's going to make the playoff. I think they're going to, win the West, but I don't know if they're good as Georgia. And if you pick Alabama over LSU, I have a simple question for you. Like, why? I think the overwhelming answer, well, it's Nick Saban. They'll figure it out. It's like, okay, maybe it's within the realm of possibility, but like LSU has like 5-6 more players that are more accomplished and maybe better than anyone on Alabama's roster. So like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? So like, I'm not saying they can't do it, but like, if you're going to rank them, like, I think it is a delineation of like the people who are paying attention and whose opinions I respect a little bit more, I think are clearly like, LSU's like the dude. And the people who are just like, well, it's Nick Saban. They've been recruiting really well. They'll be fine. It's like, if you ever actually look at their personnel, beyond the quarterback situation, we know the recruiting rankings, but like you also have to like watch guys. And like you see guys, and we talk about this in the SEC
I think this might be the first time, Dave, that a team has a 90% blue chip ratio ever.
Maybe.
And it is a funny time to say, have you looked at their personnel? Because it's like, yes, they are the deepest team in college football, but there isn't a proven entity on the roster.
There's not a lot of guys that pop. That's what you see.
But they might pop.
Forever.
They might pop. They're going like people on this roster will pop eventually, but one team has Harold Perkins and one doesn't. You know what I mean? And like, so like I get on board with what you're saying. I don't think that LSU is going to win the national title this year. I think they've got some depth issues. Maybe if they can stay if they can stay healthy all year. But yeah, so I think the benefit of the doubt for Alabama, at least between the people who are paying attention, they're not just going to walk into the playoff this year. They've got to go and figure it out, and whether or not they do it, I think, is an interesting thing to watch. So, I guess I cut you off there. Do you have anything else you want to
No,
add on that?
I think we're good. I'll lean into my next point, which is another cash-based point, Ari, which is that in the collective era, I don't think cash just fixes everything. I think if you go in and you are one of the schools that are aggressively paying recruits, certainly not inducing, Ari. No one would ever do that, obviously. They have too much honor, too much respect for the game.
Every time I hear the word inducing, I just think of pregnancies.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I think we're at that age, Ari. I think that's how that goes.
Yeah.
But Texas A&M was kind of the poster child for this. A team that talented. I think we got to the last week of the conference schedule in the SEC, and there was one team in the league that was not playing for bowl eligibility, and that was Texas A&M. I think I have that stat right. And it's amazing. And I think there's chemistry issues. I think if guys aren't really buying into the program, but they're like, well, I'm going to make more going here. I think coaches have to be really careful with how you build a roster. I think that when money gets involved, talent's not that simple. And, I think there's an element of what do you care about the most? If you signed up to be a part of Nick Saban's program, they are not sweet talking you in that recruiting process. They tell you it's going to be hard. Like, you're pretty prepared. There's not a deep programming that has to happen when you get there. You know what's happening when you join Alabama's program. Is that same type of thing happening at A&M? Do you really want to be there because you believe in this program and you want to buy all these things? And if you're not, we saw an exodus from the program after the season. A bunch of guys that got there didn't go well, really talented guys, and left. And what does that mean? I don't know about their future, but I think the idea that you could just build a roster with a bunch of money, through a collective, and that's going to work. It might. I don't think it's not as simple as recruiting in the more traditional times 5-10 years ago.
The thing that I can't stand about covering college football sometimes is that we have to make everything feel like, or there's an expectation from fans who listen and read us that like everything's a fairy tale and that everything is just the movie Rudy. And like, remember the Titans, where the team comes together and they love the university. The players do the same way that you do. You've got.
So hang on, Ari. Are you telling me that it's possible that some players didn't sign up to play for Texas A&M or any school because of the yell leaders and because they loved the interlocking TA&M logo? Are you telling me that's? I think
that probably half of the team on the most talented teams in college football knew nothing about the place 2 years before they went there. Like, I think
that's probably right for a lot of college.
There are a lot of players on college rosters that don't know what conference their team plays in, or who's on their schedule, or the cool tradition that they have at their place. Like, the fans' beauty of their program, the eye of the beholder, the way that they view it, and all the traditions and the things that you do on campus and the memories that you made there while going to school there. These people on the team, coaches and players, don't love that place as much as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't make it flowery all the time. That said, I do buy into the notion that chemistry is a very important thing when it comes to building a successful football team. You need players who like each other.
That's not what Dion said. Who are dedicated.
What did Dion say?
I don't care if my players like each other. I don't care about culture.
That's good. Well, we'll find out how
we'll see. That's a first. I never heard a coach say that.
Were you in the room? Were you in the room when he said that?
I was. Yes.
Did you giggle?
I did not. I think it. Here's the thing. We're not going to be able to get through a podcast without talking about Dion at some point this year.
Well, especially if you're on it. Yeah.
Yeah. He has had so much success in his life at almost everything that he has done that, like, the skepticism and the piece I wrote over the weekend lays out a lot of the reasons for skepticism around Colorado. But, like, you kind of just have to let him talk, and like we'll see how the results go. Like I don't really know. Like maybe there's some element of him that he's correct. I don't know. I mean, I think people thought him going to
I mean,
Jackson State was a joke.
The
And he
guy's
got the
been
number one
nothing but
recruit in the
net for
country.
3 decades. Nothing
Yeah.
but net for 3
That's
decades.
the whole thing of all this is like I don't disagree. All the points that people make, like why this is going to be terrible, Colorado, and all that stuff. I think it's going to be an improvement because you've inherited a thing taken down the front foundation. But like at the end of the day, a lot of people were saying the exact same stuff when he went to Jackson State, and he
But
built the most
buy
dominant
into
program.
the notion that he doesn't care about culture and doesn't care if his team likes each other is a complete contradiction to your point. So, like, which way do you land on this? Because I think that culture matters a lot.
I think it does matter a lot if you're trying to build a sustainable program over time. I don't know how long he'll be there, and I think I think all of the norms and the rules of college football, in a lot of ways, because of the force of personality, apply in probably a lesser way with Deion, and he also does have a good staff. But I think we'll see what that looks like. But I definitely think he's wrong about that. But in his specific case, it might work. We'll see. I think the thing that will test is if they do lose games this year, which based on the way their schedule, they're probably going to start 1-4. Maybe they steal a game or two in there. But if you start losing games, how do you handle that? Do you keep guys that got there in the summer invested? That's, I think, going to be the biggest test for Deion.
But there are a lot of people in a lot of programs that have put your theory to test. Like there is a quarterback who is on a roster this year who got paid $8 million to go to the school that he's going to. Like this isn't a unique to Texas A&M thing. NIL and collectives and buyouts and inducements and all the things, whether or not we wanted to acknowledge they exist everywhere. And players go all the time to places that they don't know anything about because they're getting paid the most. And I would take exception to the notion that money can't fix everything if you think there's a chance that a team that doesn't like each other could be functional. I think the reason why Texas A&M
I think you're playing with fire if they don't.
I think that the reason why Texas A&M has been dysfunctional is because they've done everything but emphasize the importance of chemistry. I mean, even if you go look at Bobby Petrino and Jimbo Fisher on the same staff right now, that could go really well, and Texas A&M could be very good this year, or you could forget to do something in a chemistry lab and it could explode in the most glorious way possible. And it's like you don't have these types of questions or what ifs at most other programs. So I'm just saying, like, I do think that money can fix everything if you buy into the notion that you just need to get the players on your team and keep them there, regardless of how they feel about the coaching staff or their peers. But I don't think that you could have an 85-man roster in a sport where teamwork is this important and not like each other. And from that standpoint, I agree with your point, and I don't think that you can buy a national championship roster. We'll see how this goes in 4 and 5, 6 years on the line in NIL, but I don't know if any of the teams that are most rumored to be heavy NIL big hitters actually made the type of move that you would expect them to make, right? Like, I guess A&M signed the greatest class on paper in history of recruiting, and the assumption is that NIL played a big part of it, but Tennessee's another program that people think is I mean, they're the ones with the most competent collective, right? And they came out of the gate swinging, but I don't look at their recruiting class last year and go, holy shit, this team's going to win a national championship. Like, I mean, they've got a long way to go before they're on par with their peers in the SEC. So, can money fix everything? Right now I'm with you that it can't. But I'm very, very certain that there are certain teams that are going to be putting your theory to the test here. And we're going to see who's right and who's wrong. There's going to be a lot of money spent to figure out whether or not that hypothesis is right or wrong.
I think the idea is that when you're pumping money into things, that this can't miss. And I think my point is that it can.
Yeah.
What's your next point, Ari?
So this kind of goes into your first one, and I'm very curious about your thought process on this. So your first one was, do stars matter in all settings or whatever? This one is, are we 100% sure that you need to have a first-round NFL draft pick at the quarterback position to win a national championship?
Yes. I remain unconvinced. I think people really underrated how good Stetson Bennett was. And it's not about tools necessarily. I'm going to change your point. I don't think you need a first-round quarterback. I think you need an impact player. I don't think you can do it without an impact player.
So Max Duggan was an impact player, right?
Yes.
Stetson Bennett made impact plays. But there was a certain stretch there with, the Trevor Lawrence run and the Deshaun Watson run and the Tua run and a lot of things where they had first-round NFL draft picks there. And it felt like the only way that you could do it all and go all the way is by having a first-round NFL draft pick. And I don't know that is the case anymore because there were two teams last year who played for a national championship who didn't have a first-round pick at the position.
I think it got muddled, okay? Because we did have such a run of like generational talents at quarterback that people assumed that, but I think it's not so much what the NFL thinks here, guy. I think you have to have a guy that wins you games. I don't think Jake Coker can win a national title in 2023, right? I don't think that, Brody Croyle or Greg McElroy, I don't think that can work anymore. You don't need Trevor Lawrence or, I don't think you need a first round pick, but you need a guy that wins you games, that actively affects the outcomes of games and makes plays that not a lot of guys can make. That doesn't have anything to do with his tools. And I think with Stetson, you look at the plays he was able to make, clutch throws, plays with his legs. Yes, The tools aren't there, the size aren't there, but you cannot look at what Georgia did last year, the last 2 years, and not say like Stetson Bennett, heck of a player, made them a lot better, made a ton of plays that made an acute impact on that season. And that's, I think, what you need.
Yeah, so that is the point here, which is for a while there, it started to feel like if you don't have a 5-star quarterback who's going to be playing on Sundays, you don't have a shot to win a national championship. And I think Stetson Bennett proved, especially if you're on a team that's as deeply talented as Georgia was, that just being a functional playmaker who doesn't turn the ball over and can make, critical throws or first downs when in critical positions, that would be enough. Because it's just like, I'm bringing this up in the context of, the 3 favorites to win the national championship this year in Vegas are Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. And are we sure that any of them have a first-round pick starting this year? Like, obviously, a lot can change between now and April.
Yeah.
Kyle McCord or Devin Brown and, Jalen Milroe or the other 9 players on the Alabama team or, Carson Beck. Like, I don't know. It's not like they have Trevor Lawrence walking through the doors at any of those places. In fact, the 2 best quarterbacks in college football this year are Drake May and Caleb Williams, both of whom have a long, long way to go from a team perspective to even be playing in the college football playoff. Because
it's not their fault. Their defenses are terrible.
Athletic staff. Well, I know, but I'm saying the athletic staff could probably line up 11 people and score points on both of those teams. So, that said, I used to just think that you have to have a Drake May type player on your team to do it. And last year, the 2 teams that played for a national championship, not only played for the national championship, but, other top 5 picks last year, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young didn't make it to the championship game. So, yeah, it's just like quarterback recruiting is such a critical topic. And, getting the 5-star guy is proven that your program is the epitome of healthy. But really, there's a huge difference between what a player can do in the NFL and what a really good college quarterback looks like. And those 2 things don't have to be equal in order for you to win a national championship anymore. And I think that's an exciting proposition. So it's like TCU is the perfect example of, this year they're signing a kid named House Haney, who's a 3-star prospect, and he's out of Alito, Texas. Me and you have a connection there, if you remember. And
we'll discuss this off the air,
and we'll discuss this off the air and on the air eventually. But he's like a 5'9" quarterback who has a monster arm, is fast as hell, like runs like Olympic track times, and like is a 3-star guy because he isn't tall enough. It's like that guy is going to go to TCU, and in 3 years he's going to be one of the best players in the Big 12, and if not the country.
That's why I would have liked to have seen Mason Fine at a bigger program.
It's just it would have been. I mean, like, I think the best, like, I covered Ohio State for 10 years, and the best quarterback who played there was Braxton Miller. That guy wouldn't sniff a snap at the quarterback position at the next level. But in college, he was tremendous. There's a huge difference between those 2 things. And I think, like, what you said is true. You have to have a college playmaker, but it doesn't matter if he's a prototypical 6'3", 225 guy that can run pretty quickly and throw the ball 80 yards in the air. He just has to be able to make plays in college. And the thing that I think people really don't realize is you don't have to have that strong of an arm in college And you don't have to make Aaron Rodgers like throws in the NFL to
No.
be able to be a really good college player.
And there's a lot of systems that can take
mask those
advantage.
things.
Yes, I think so.
So that's my 4. And mine, it kind of bleeds into my 5, but I'll let you go and then we'll wrap it back around.
Well, your 4 actually bleeds into mine because I think we are in a very different era of college football. In the transfer portal era has changed how you build as a first-year coach. And that is plug and play, QBs and scheme. They can change everything pretty much overnight. Washington, I think, is the best example of this. A team that, ranked outside of the top 100 in every offensive category, something like that under Jimmy Lake their last year. They bring in Kalen DeBoer, who had some success at Indiana. They bring in, and obviously at Fresno State, they bring in Michael Penix from Indiana. They get those two boys back together, and they made some magic. I think they're going to do it again this year. We saw that again, obviously, with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. To a lesser extent, Kenny Dillingham and Bo Nix under Dan Lanning at Oregon. This year, what does that mean for Tanner Mordecai in Wisconsin? Luke Fickell comes in there. You change your offensive system. You bring in a quarterback. And there's a lot of other pieces and a lot of things that have to go in there. But I think you can see like a spike overnight, which was not possible 2-3 years ago for a new coach. I think we're in a new era of college football in the sort of microwave offense era.
I'm very curious because you're right about that. I'm very curious what happens in year 2 of that when that happens. I think a lot of people are looking at Kalen DeBoer in Washington as a team that, is one of the 2 favorites or 3 favorites to win the Pac-12 this year and go to the playoff. And it's like, is the shot in the arm that you get by doing the quick flip and adding the quarterback and the scheme change into your system to get some immediate results, a good long-term trajectory? Because that's the thing that always scares me with the portal, Dave. It's like portal evaluation is key, and those things do change everything. But how hard is it to consistently be good at evaluating the portal? I think part of it's luck and part of it's being able to convince guys that are already good to come to your program. And can you actually build a sustainable model through the portal? And I think Florida State might be on the verge of showing us that you can, because they did so well in the portal for a few years, and now it's bleeding into high school recruiting. And they might be able to get back under Mike Norvell because of it. So you are 100% correctly, but where's your take on longevity and, the built to last aspect of this?
I think they're 2 separate things. I think you can do the short fix and then hit the recruiting trail. That gives you time. That gives you a proof of concept to sell. We kind of saw this at Tennessee a little bit, right? You give them a year where, okay, you have Hendon Hooker, you have Josh Heupel, you bring in a new system, you have a new quarterback, and now you got something to sell on the recruiting trail. Now all of a sudden you're recruiting 5-star receivers, you're getting 5-star quarterbacks. The collective money can't hurt. So I think it's not an either or. I think it's an and both. Hey, let's win now. Let's get a guy now that we believe, and then let's take this and sell this on the recruiting trail and build something sustainable.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm with you on that. Okay, my last one here kind of bleeds into it a little bit. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Is Georgia the new Alabama? And that might sound kind of funny to you, but my question is, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts and college football talk shows the last few months, and a lot of people say that what Nick Saban did is unprecedented and probably will never happen again. And every single time I hear them say that, I go, are you watching what's happening right now? I'm like this is literally happening again right in front of our eyes. Like, is your take on the way that Georgia is recruiting, the way it's situated this year, the fact that they've won 2 national championships in a row, like, if you had to I just wanted to blanket ask this. If you had to guess how many national championships Georgia will win in the next 10 years, what would your guess be?
I'd probably take the over on 2.5.
Okay.
It's really hard to win a title. I'm gonna disagree with you somewhat. Georgia has surpassed Bama as the class of the sport. What I think made Alabama's run so impressive is the sustainable power of the program in so many different iterations. And Saban keeping his culture, changing his offense when it looks so much different on the field, embracing the process and hiring a bunch of new coaches. That is going to be a reality for Kirby Smith, and this will be or Kirby Smart, and this will be the year that we figure out, can you do some of those same things? You've reached the mountaintop. It's really hard to reach it. It might be even harder to stay there. And you've had to make 2 coordinator hires, obviously, in the last couple of years. You bring in Mike Bobo. Now you're making a quarterback change. Can you keep that going as you lose staffers and as you lose quarterbacks? Because Nick Saban did that time and time again. And that, I think, is what separated him and made him so great. Obviously, doing it at multiple places is part of that. But keeping a program without having it fall off Bama has been the class of the sport since pretty much the 08-09 season. That's almost 15 years where they've been a top 4 program, and they're still going to be a great program, even if not the absolute best. I think Georgia clearly has passed them on that. But sustaining it is so hard. Look at Pete Carroll. Look at Urban Meyer. Look at the Miami teams with Coker and I'm forgetting the coach that preceded him, Butch Davis. It's hard to maintain it for long amounts of time. Usually it's like about a 5-year window where you kind of go up and it works and then it comes back down. So this will be the year that I think we'll learn, can Georgia sustain it?
The lopsided nature of the sport is just getting worse, man. It's just
Yes.
not the same as it used to be. I don't know. I just don't know if you can use, and listen, those early 2000 Miami teams had as big of a talent advantage against their opponents as anybody that you could come across in today's game. But the way that Georgia is recruiting right now, I don't know if it's a controversial thing to say, it might make your head explode, but any competent coordinator is going to be fine there. They have so much talent and so much advantage. It's like, do they even need to play the regular season to know that they're 2 games away from winning a national championship this year? They're about to get 3 in a row, probably. I don't know what team I would pick more comfortably to win the national championship on August 15th than them right now. And I think that that's probably something that you would agree with. Even
they're definitely the best team. I don't know that they're going to. I don't know that they're going to get there, but they're the best team, no question. Mm-hmm.
But they're going to be in the playoff. What would have to happen for them not to make the playoff?
I don't even know.
Some HBO sci-fi series shit would have to happen.
Quarterback injury, I think they could still be okay.
Yeah,
the schedule,
they'll be fine.
It's not good. Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be 2 games away in an indoor dome with a huge talent advantage with whoever they play to win 3 in a row. And I know, how many does Saban have? Does he have 8? I always forget the numbers. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's 7 or 8.
So Kirby Smart has a long way to go to do it, but he's young. He's got it.
Kirby should have 3 for the record.
Yeah, and also too, recruiting and owning the sport from Georgia is a lot easier than Tuscaloosa.
Yes,
when you go look at Alabama's history as a whole, they've had 2 of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, and they've been pretty fine otherwise. They haven't been elite without those 2 coaches. The sustainability at Georgia, I think, is a lot easier than it would be at Alabama, just from the way it's situated. Mm-hmm. I think in 10 years, Kirby Smart and his program will be viewed very similarly to the way that we view Alabama now.
I think you're probably
right. I think that if they win 3 in a row, which is a very distinct possibility, it's like they are on the turbo track to get there. And they got Dylan Raiola coming in, and the recruiting is just so lopsided. I just don't know what would have to go wrong for them not to win 3 or 4 more in the next 10 years. He could get there. I think it's on the table there. So, I am and have been, at times, especially by Andy, accused of being a prisoner of the moment, and maybe I am right now. But I look at what is coming in. I look what's on the roster now, and maybe the new system will just make it harder to win a national championship, and that's why I won't, because winning all those games in the expanded playoff might be more difficult. But
all right, we got to wrap here soon. How do you feel about a rapid fire round? I got a couple more lessons to throw at you.
Okay, let's do quick ones.
Portal evaluation is still key. Listen, I know in the portal era, everyone assumes, well, we got a problem, we'll fix it in the portal. It's fine. Portal hit rate is still basically the same as JUCO hit rate. You're about 50% that you can get a guy that you can rely on that can contribute. And half
And
the
the
time,
50%, by the way, is people that you already know are good.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of people like, oh, Justin Fields is in the portal. Okay, we'll just go get that guy.
Yeah.
Or Sam Hartman's in the portal. It's a lot easier to evaluate Sam Hartman than it is to go get somebody that you know has 5 snaps of tape in college that you haven't seen play. You know, it's like I don't even know how. Honestly speaking, I don't know how you even do it in most of these cases. Like, what does the evaluation process look like for a team who, for a guy who came into school, hasn't played for 2 years, wants to transfer somewhere else, and his recruitment's open for 5 days? Like, how do you even navigate that?
Well, you got to do your pre-work. You got to know who's going in. All right, my next one. Breakthroughs in hungry places are like incredible. Listen, A&M, you might be next on the board. Last year we saw it at Tennessee. The game against Alabama was probably it surpassed Nebraska, Texas A&M in 2010 as the most memorable night of work that I have had. When they've been hungry for so long and they finally get that moment that sort of like says that they've arrived. A&M, man, if they get it this year, they're the one that I'm looking at, that a hungry place that might do some very special things. A couple more for you, Ari. Don't fall for the midseason darlings. It sort of happens sort of every year, but last year we had some fantastic ones. Kansas starts 5-0. They win one more game the rest of the year. Syracuse starts 6-0. They also win one more game every year. And Ari, I didn't do this last year, but a lot of people did, and people are doing it again this year. Stop overlooking Utah. Don't do it. Don't do it.
It was funny because I did the Pac-12 preview show with Chris Vanini on Tuesday, and one of the
did you guys overlook
I didn't
Utah?
write the prompt, but no, the prompt was USC, Oregon, and Washington. Will these 3 teams make up the 2 that play in the championship? I was like, I think maybe we should put Utah in there too, because you know they're the 2-time defending champs and they play a certain style that seems to be the kryptonite for the finesse teams on the West Coast. So yes, I'm with you on all those things.
I picked them to go to the playoff last year, and then I backed off of it when they lost to Florida, and all they did was win the Pac-12 again.
Well, I mean, when they lost to Florida, you were right; they weren't going to make the playoff again. But
listen,
I don't know about you, but I feel like if Caleb Williams, I was at the game in Vegas, the Pac-12 championship game. I feel like if he didn't get hurt, they probably would have lost. Utah would have lost that game to USC,
but he did, and they didn't.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, you know, it took some circumstance. USC has to, you know, has a lot to fix, but you know, I still think that USC is probably the class. I mean, but by the way, go look at USC's schedule though; it's pretty gnarly. If you go look at the second half of that schedule. So, all right, Dave, that was a good show. Sorry again for you know, making you seasick because the computer was bouncing up and down, and you know, I've got a boat picture behind me, but
we'll be back.
We made it through. We'll be back in the office here next week, and you know, I feel like I've spent 2 days in my own bed in August, and I'm like starting to get a little tired of it. But hey, that was the latest edition of Stars Matter. Please, 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 please subscribe everywhere that you can, wherever you listen to your podcast. Rate and review. It helps expand our audience. It helps legitimize us as a place to be for college football fans and authority on the sport. And of course, if you want to subscribe and watch on the YouTube channel, the link to the channel can be found in our show's description. We will continue to preview the college football season as we approach week 0 here in 2 weeks. Dave,
it's coming.
Cannot wait. So stick with us and get prepared and get excited, and